Hey guys, it's Big Germ. We're going to work on a Discraft Pro Clinic today, talking about 3 different types of distance shots: sidearm, backhand, and overhand. Everybody wants to throw farther, so we're going to show you my techniques and hopefully we'll learn something today. Alright guys, let's start off by discussing the backhand. Before we get into footwork and follow through, let's start off with the grip. I hold, in fact, all of my backhands with a modified power grip. It's more of a control grip or fan grip. It's one finger wrapped around the bottom of the disc and the other 3 fingers are fanned out with the pinky tucked in at the bottom of the disc and almost shoved into the wedge of the disc down the bottom. When I'm looking at my shot, I'm focusing on a lot of different things. I'm focusing on the wind, I'm focusing on the ground, how it slopes, where the trouble is, and with those 3 elements, I can choose which shot to throw the best. If you're trying to get as far as you want, throwing backhand is important. You're throwing with your entire body, and it allows you to throw farther than sidearm or thumber or roller, and it's also more consistent. When I start, I approach the tee-pad with an X step. It turns my hip away from my target, allows me to reach back and pull across my chest, and I get more distance than I can with sidearm or overhand. When I'm going for a backhand distance shot, I'm going with the ESP Nuke. It's the fastest disc that I've ever thrown, and it's comfortable to the grip, so when I'm going for a huge shot, I gotta throw a disc that flips up, glides, turns over, and has enough stability to come back consistently. And the ESP Nuke is becoming my fastest, most consistent disc in my bag. The biggest problem I see when people are trying to throw distance sidearm shots is they're just trying too hard. They reach back and they throw real hard and they don't have very much control, and what they end up doing is rolling their wrist over. The most important key to throwing distance sidearm shots is this selection, and then it's just making sure your palm is facing the sky through your follow through. That way you know that you're not rolling your wrist over, the disc's not coming out with flutter, and it just goes farther. I try to incorporate a slight X step into my sidearm, just like I do with my backhand. What that does is it turns my hips away from my target a little bit and allows me to swing my body as opposed to just swinging my arm. That way, it's not just here to there, it's here to there. And that allows me to create much more of a catapult type of effect. I personally have found that the most comfortable grip for me is 2 fingers tucked in tightly in the rim. I take the middle of my middle finger and stick it into the wedge of the disc, and I put my index finger on top of it, almost at a 45-degree angle, and it's a really comforting grip. It's not going anywhere. It's a tight grip with my thumb on top of that flight plate, and you couldn't pull this thing out of my hand. To get most distance out of my sidearm, I throw an understable disc, and I rely on it to flip up and turn over and carry on its glide. When I'm going with the sidearm for distance shots, I usually go with the surge. It flips up, it's consistent, has a lot of glide, and it gets where I need it to go. So I go with the surge. Let's talk about the mechanics of the thumber. Start off like a baseball throw from outfield. You're throwing it straight into the air, and the disc should fly like this, panning back to the left and coming back to the right, spiking into the ground. One of the disadvantages of throwing the thumber is the squirrely landing. You're not exactly sure if it's going to spike, if it's going to hit, cut, and roll, but it's kind of one of the chances you take with throwing a thumber. If you're throwing on top of a tree, that's one of the advantages. You know, you have a low ceiling and it's risky to throw into the leaves or limbs. Go over the top. That's what I like to do. It's also a shot that you need to make sure your shoulder is warmed up for. Before you start a disc golf round, I suggest warming up anyways. I mean, you don't want to go out there with a cold body. So really swing your arms around, make sure your shoulder is nice and loose before you start throwing these shots, because you could really do some damage to your shoulder. Okay, this is the grip for the hook thumb. I put my thumb in the rim and I use my right finger to almost pull like a trigger or a hook around the edge of the disc. It's a tight, sturdy grip, and again, like my sidearm, it's not going anywhere. And that's important. When you're throwing a thumber, your grip is so key because it's the only thing that you have in contact with the disc, obviously. So if it slips out, you're going to get a really poor shot. So make sure that the grip is super tight, And I like to throw my thumbers at around the 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock angle. If I throw it at 12 o'clock, it's going to pan slower and it should give me more distance. When I throw it at 11 o'clock, I know that it's going to go further right, and that's also good depending on what the shot calls for. So you have to judge which angle works best for you, and you just got to give it some practice. 4. When I'm going for a long thumber, I'm going with the flick. It's flat, it's overstable, it pans slow, it's cutting through the air vertical, less gravity, and it just goes far.